Welcome back to the devlog. This is week 5 of development. So, we started off this week trying to get the Invector package working with my project. This is a more robust third-person controller paid for, and it offers a professional level suite of functionality for third-person controllers like shooting, melee, inventory systems. So I I had the challenge of kind of starting over again because I was using the top-down engine third-person controller, and importing this package caused a lot of problems with my existing implementation. I pretty much broke everything because it required that I change project settings, redo to their system settings that they expect for inputs using the legacy input, and also setting a bunch of layers. So I tried to do a merge to keep both systems intact, but it was really kind of no good. I did the best I could, but everything broke. So I spent a lot of time getting the project back up and stable with this new system because it all really depended. My goal was to get the cover system working. Top-down engine offers a basic character controller and basic animations, and that's fine. But it's really not production quality. You need to build a lot on top of that. So instead of implementing a cover system within top-down engine, I decided to use a system that has it as an add-on. That was Invector. So I'm switching over the Invector controller and looking at a lot of their demos to see, and diving into the documentation and seeing how this thing works. And it's, needless to say, it's very, very complicated. There's a lot going on. It offers a lot of features and functionality, but I don't really need everything right now. My goal was to get the new character control implemented on my model from the top, clean implementation from the bottom up. So I was gonna have to understand the actual implementation of, how how a how they built their demo controller and all these different things involved with it. So my original plan, I had an idea to kind of build my own system, taking bits and pieces from one system, the top-down engine, and Invector, and kind of incorporating the best ideas, building a system from scratch, just using bits and pieces that I need, and leaving the rest. And that turned out to be a bad idea because all I was doing was, it was just a complete mess. Everything was tied together and integrated within the system, and I was basically, and the problem is the Invector system is very, very, very complicated. It would take a very long time to understand everything that's going on and how it all works. In the process, I learned about how the system works from a code levels view, but in the end, I decided it was not such a great idea, and I decided to instead use inheritance as a wrapper class, basically, to wrap my own class around their implementation and keep the Invector library and keep the top-down engine library clean and intact, and no changes, so that I could build my systems on top of their systems as a dependency and just overwrite behavior. They offer a lot of methods and classes that are extendable, and that's what I've done. So instead of building my own system from pieces and taking a really long time, I'm building my systems on top of these systems and tying them together on my own system. So my goal is not to change anything in these systems, treat them like frameworks. Um, the only changes I will allow is if they don't offer extensibility to their functions to overwrite behavior. I will modify the library and mark the functions virtual so I can override them. That's the only thing I'll do. Like, everything else remains intact and clean, so I can actually have minimal a minimal merge if I ever have to do a library update. So that's going to work out for me. And then I can, so like the character controller, I can actually overwrite the move input and the input manager to actually use the event system, because this system is built off the legacy input, and that's fine. And also key code input, and I wanted to use the actual input system package and use event-driven actions like I've learned how to do. So I can implement an override behavior on top of all that, and I think it works out pretty good. So I was testing out the Invector controller. In my opinion, it's a lot better. It offers a lot more features and functionality. A lot smoother animations for sure. Yeah, it just really more of a clean, polished, professional look to start with. Top-down system was very basic, and it kind of felt janky-ish. This is something I want to go with for sure. So I had to move away and redo a lot of the implementations, refactor from the original TDE implementation, kind of throw that all in the garbage and focus around the building my character controller with the Invector system. All the pieces and all the requirements used to make that happen. So really putting it together piece by piece, script by script, into its own wrapper classes to work how it should with my own controller, with the bare necessities. So not all the other stuff that features and functionality, but just what it takes to get the cover system working with this controller. On my way, I checked out the Amplify Animations package and the Rain package. The Amplify Animations package has a lot of extra animations that I could actually use, and I can actually incorporate that. So the goal is to incorporate multiple systems under the umbrella of my own custom system via inheritance. I think that's the way I'm going to go. Let's see. Talked about that. So, working with the cover system, I eventually got to the point where I constructed working movable input, being able to move around the screen again, stable, and turned to focusing on how the actual cover system works in Invector with these objects here. So it works on a different script called Cover Controller, and you need to have the Invector system to work with this cover system, like I said. So creating a normal object and then doing these cover lines, a good tool to extend around and create this line around here. So learning how that works, it needs a nav mesh to work correctly. Doing a lot of testing in the demo scenes and figuring it all out. Working through issues. And also, the last thing was I couldn't just use any old camera in my scene. The cover system requires a user specialized third-person camera. It's a third-person script. Once again, I did a wrapper class for the third-person camera, keeping all the functionality, learning a lot along the way. And so I finally got cover working with my character. I can demonstrate. It'll actually work just as well. Move around corners, enter and exit cover. This is fantastic. So finally, through all that pain and trouble, the cover system's working. And different cover lines, you can have automatic crouch. It's really a great package. That doesn't have a cover line, but I did a lot of testing, so this works how it should. So I took a lot of effort, most of the week, in order to get this working with my own character controller implementation, the bare minimum. So I'm building piece by piece, functionality by functionality in a clean manner, my own custom implementation of my own character controller. So kind of keeping the underlying library of offered features intact, but also keeping mine minimal and just using what it needs to, the systems that it needs to use, so I can have a clean, organized system that I understand. Um, so once I got that working, everything's fine. I took another crack at fixing the stealth effect. Like the problem I was having before in um, my my issue was that I was using in my shader graph, I was using a world space for a position node, and the problem comes in with when you go up a ramp like this, the actual stealth effect would transition. That's not right. And the other problem is when I had it set to object, it would actually transition and calculate because the character is a multi-mesh object. It has a body mesh. It has a attached helmet. As an attached helmet and attached tail. So they would all calculate in different object spaces and go at different times. It wouldn't look right. I wanted to do a transition from the Y top down in a whole manner. That worked kind of in world space, but like I said, had the problem with going up and changing your vertical world space. That would not work correctly. So doing a lot of testing, trying to figure it out. I eventually came to the realization that the shader graph has limited ability. It can do a lot, but that edge case of doing specifically what I wanted to do, a Y transition from top to bottom with a multi-mesh object, is just not a use case that um, is easily workable with this tool. So trying a bunch of stuff, I actually came across normal vector, and that seemed to be a good enough solution, which offered a kind of a dissolve transition. Instead of a top-down, it would do a dissolve animation, which I think looks just as good. But it doesn't have to consider different object spaces. It just takes the vector normals and applies the transition to those. Which I mean, so sometimes it's like I could spend a ton of time like getting it exactly the way I want to, or go with a compromise that's just as good and works just as fine, and we don't have the problems of world space. It's calculating object space. So otherwise I'd have to go into and learn, like I'd have to, because you can't actually access the nodes. I learned in shader graph with code. You can the inputs are very primitive, like floats and vectors. You can't actually input an object and set the position node input to that imported object. It doesn't. That's not the way. So shader graph has its limitations. I also learned that there's a difference between a shader graph and a shader. So like Amplify Shader uses a shader which is fully programmatic. You can get into the code and fully program it, but it's in a different language. It's like not C#. It's its own language to program shaders, and I'm not going to even go down that rabbit hole just for the effect. Maybe later I can get into that, but right now it's like I think shader graph is a good enough tool for doing some things that you want to do, but it's a good enough compromise to kind of just to get things done right now. So that was interesting. So I got this the stealth working again with this new character controller, and I hooked up to the button, so that works now. My final task coming to the end of the week was making the VR head-mounted display camera work again, and surprisingly it worked pretty well. I just did a few things and it was working in the head-mounted display without too much trouble with the third-person camera. I thought there'd be more issues, and I had it going pretty well with just the camera, and I finally tried to hook up the inputs for the VR controllers again, and that's where I started at the end of the week, started to run into trouble. The Invector system doesn't really play. It plays nice with the gamepad. I have no problems using the headset, and I have no problems using the headset and the normal gamepad controller. But as soon as I plug in the XR controllers and map the inputs to that, it kind of half works, half doesn't. There's something going wrong where I haven't figured out what's happening. Like, sometimes it'll run normally like this, but then all of a sudden it'll switch. And looking at the runtime code, what's happening is the moving event is getting fired multiple times, one with the actual value, and then a second time with an actual 0 value. I'm not sure who's calling it twice or what's happening, but essentially the input is it causes the character to move very slowly and slightly, but it's constantly overwritten to this 0. So there's some bug going on there that I'll have to work out with, specifically with the XR controller. I'm not sure what's going on. So trying to find that bug is part of the process, but that's what we'll be working on starting next week and continuing on down. So having the stealth cover system, that was the big goal for the week. Getting the stealth working, or getting the cover system working, and then the stealth working again in the camera. We're pretty much back to where we were, except now we're using a more powerful, professional third-person character controller that offers a lot of built-in functionality that we're going to need, like shooting. The only thing it doesn't offer is, I don't think, is robust AI. So there's still some things in the top-down engine, especially around game management functionality, that I want to be using later. But this is a good, it was a good week. I put a calculated running my time timer for the whole week, about 38 hours, 5 days, 38 hours and 12 minutes. That's what the timer read. And we'll keep working on it next week. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you later. Bye.